Welcome back to the White House. The big topic of discussion right here tonight, the ongoing tensions with Iran. Let's talk about the situation and some of the other news of the day with Florida Senator Marco Rubio. He's a member of the Senate Foreign Relations and Intelligence Committees. He joins us from Capitol Hill. Senator, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Senator, what about the disconnect? Some people look at the president not shooting down the American drone. After shooting down of the American drone by Iran, not responding then, but then tweeting today in one of 3 tweets saying that any attack by Iran now on anything American will be met with great and overwhelming force. In some areas, overwhelming meaning obliteration. Is there a disconnect?
No, I think this is a delicate situation. The president has a lot of options before him, by the way, and some of them are not kinetic, meaning some of them are not things that blow up in the traditional sense. And I can say to you that some have been disclosed already. The U.S. has responded and in ways that some are not publicly disclosed and aren't going to be discussed. But I think it's important to understand what's happening here. You know, I hear my Democratic colleagues on the floor today were talking about all this, and they're acting as if when the Iran deal was in place, Iran was some peaceful or benign country that wasn't doing anything. Even with the deal in place, they were building rockets with increasing range and lethality and accuracy. They were supplying Hezbollah. They were standing up these Shia militias. They were destabilizing Yemen with the Houthis. They were conducting cyber attacks. And this is all with the deal in place because the deal allowed them to do that. And so I think it's important for everybody to understand the deal was just about nuclear enrichment. It did nothing to limit all of these other destabilizing things that they're now continuing to do and are being responded to.
How do you think Europe responds? Because obviously these sanctions are having an effect. Iran is reacting to that. Its economy is really hurting as a result of this and increased sanctions. But what about Europe? Does it hold the line with the U.S.?
Well, let me say it's not just their economy that's hurting. Iran has less money available today than it had a year ago to give Hezbollah, to give the Shia militias, to build those missiles. I think the Europeans, frankly, are desperate to save this deal and don't want anything to happen. Look, they know Iran is behind these things, but they've calculated for their own national interest that keeping Iran in this deal is more important. And they're going to bend over backwards and try to go as far as they can to try to keep that deal together. But ultimately, I think Iran will cross lines that even the Europeans will have to acknowledge, whether it's passing the enrichment limits later this month or some open attack that it'll be impossible for them to deny.
You know there's not an appetite for going to war. If you ask the American people, it's just not there. The president suggested he doesn't want to. But what is his red line, do you believe?
Well, I think there's 2 differences between going to war and defending yourself. The president has clear constitutional authority and an obligation to defend America or defend Americans if they come under attack. If you look at the force posture and the defense assets that are in the Mideast, they're not there to launch an invasion. This is nothing like Iraq or Afghanistan. They are there to respond to an attack. Because I'm going to tell you something. If Americans had come under attack, if they had killed our ambassador or diplomats, if they had killed American servicemen and women, and we didn't have sufficient troop presence in the region to defend them, to respond, to save them, then the question all of his critics would be asking is, why didn't we have the defense assets in the region postured to respond? So the president has the obligation and the authority to respond to an attack and to dissuade them in the future, and that's what I think his red lines are. If there are Americans' lives in danger or key national interest of ours in danger, the president's going to act, and I hope the Iranians realize that.
I want to turn to Venezuela. The Russians are now in the region. They've got a warship in Cuba, actively helping Venezuela, as are the Cubans, significantly. Here's what you said actually in 2018 about Maduro. Take a listen.
Shooting down aircraft in international airspace is, even if unmanned, is an act of war. It's a violation of international law, and there needs to be a consequence for it.
That's not it. We're going to play this other soundbite. Hold on. This is what you said in 2018.
The dictatorship in Venezuela knows, and the people that surround Nicolás Maduro know that they are on borrowed time.
All right. My point in playing it was that's April 2018.
Yep.
This is a lot of borrowed time. He's still in power. What's happening?
I question what he's not actually in power, so he controls the repressive apparatus of the government. If you look at what's happened inside of Venezuela, 2 interesting things have developed. The first is the Maduro regime, which is not a government, by the way. It functions more like a criminal enterprise. They basically surrendered the entire country. They don't provide basic services or any government services outside of Caracas. They kind of retreated to Caracas. They have less than $5 billion in reserves on hand, no access to foreign currency. Even the people around Maduro know that his days are numbered and that he needs to go, that he can't correct course for the country. What's happening now is pretty fascinating. 3 separate camps have developed inside of the Venezuelan regime, all sort of battling to see who wins out. Maduro and his Cuban believers. Then he's got this political group that has no power. But then you've got the corrupt elite regime figures. They're the ones that are going to move on Maduro here eventually. My bigger concern is not that Maduro holds on. My bigger concern is that what follows him, at least in the early stages, is not a democracy or even headed towards democracy. That's the bigger problem.
You know, President Obama, his administration said that Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad's days were numbered. He's still there. The number was at least 1,000 by now. Here's what Forbes says about Venezuela. On the economic front, the regime has used external support from China and especially Cuba and Russia to hang on to power. The government is also reported to be earning money by allowing cocaine to flow from Colombia through Venezuela, and basically saying these actions have helped sustain the regime. Are they just going to stick it out?
No, it's totally different from Syria. Can't even compare. In Syria, they used chemical weapons against the population. You had a Russian intervention, an Iranian intervention, a Hezbollah intervention. The Russians are doing some things on the margins and the periphery that are important, but they can't afford and aren't going to save Maduro. The Chinese are not going to save Maduro. The Cubans can't save Maduro. Maduro has no money. They are running out of money. They are running out of resources. It's apparent. And every month that goes by, it gets worse and worse for them. I don't think there's any question that that's happening. They've basically begun to liquidate all of their gold reserves, and even there they're having trouble. They have $5 billion abroad that have been frozen by banks that they can't get access to. So every single day that goes by, they have trouble paying the bills at their diplomatic facilities around the world. So it's not that Maduro's going to hold on. He's going to go eventually one way or the other, meaning leave the country. My bigger concern now is that we need to ensure that what follows is a transition to democracy, not just another dictator that's less pro-Cuba and less pro-Russia, but nonetheless not democratic.
Last thing quickly, we're heading to your town, your state tomorrow for the Democratic debates in Miami. You've been through the debate ringer a few times. Any suggestions for the Democrats over the next 2 days?
Well, I can give them good advice on how to finish third, but other than that, look, I think it's going to be really interesting to watch 20 candidates or whatever the number is on 2 separate stages, 2 separate nights. The Democratic Party is going through a really interesting moment. Their reaction to Donald Trump has been to extremely veer to the far left. You see things that were once, denied. I remember Democrats used to get offended if you call them a socialist. Now you have people openly running in favor of it. You can't even get the BDS bill passed to support Israel. You've got voices defending anti-Semitism and saying all sorts of things that in the past were well outside the mainstream, have now become part of the energy and the mainstream in the Democratic Party. It's going to be interesting to see that play out over the next couple nights.
Senator Marco Rubio, we appreciate your time.
Thank you.